While he was in Detroit, Jordan Sheridan of Status Quo was also able to get an exclusive interview with UAW president Shawn Fain, covered a range of issues. Let's take a listen to some of the highlights.
Joe Kernan, who's worth $3 million, that's his salary at CNBC, he said, that's just optics, what the CEOs make. It doesn't really matter. UAW is deploying a, quote, politics of envy by continually hammering the CEO pay. Are you and the workers just, quote, envious of the CEOs?
I call it a politics of reality. The reality of what our members go through every day. I mean, the majority of our workers are scraping to get by, paycheck to paycheck. I mean, that's not envy. When workers start out at $15 or $16 an hour, and it could take them years as a temp to even get to full-time. If they get to full-time, there's no guarantee they'll get there. If they do, they go to 18, and then they have an 8-year progression to get to full pay. Our members are, this isn't the old Big Three where, it was the gold standard. When you got a job at the Big Three, you were set for life. That's not what this is anymore. And that's what we're fighting to bring back. These jobs should matter. And we're generating $250 billion in profits in the last decade, $21 billion the first 6 months this year. And our workers are falling further and further behind. That's got to stop. And, it's ironic, when, Kramer's comparing me to Trotsky or anyone else and talking about, the ninth class at Harvard is going to be Shawn Fain and communism. And I laugh, it's like I tell them, I come from Central Indiana. I said, Central Indiana is really known for a breeding ground for cornfields and communism. It's laughable.
I don't know if you saw Mary Barra, she, the General Motors CEO, did a bit of a robotic interview on CNN. She was asked, how do you kind of justify you're getting a 34% increase? Why shouldn't workers get? She gave some weird math equation that 92% of her salary is based on company performance. I kind of take that reading in between the lines as the stock price. Can you kind of talk about, because it seems like they're just doing this scheme of buying back the stock to juice up the stock so the CEO and executives make more pay. She's not specifically talking about like the workers.
Well, the worst part of this, like I tell people, when she talks about performance, she's getting paid and the stock price goes up and down based off the performance of our members, of our workers, because they're in there busting their asses doing this work, delivering great product. Sales happen, that generates the massive profits. But the sick, twisted part of this is, you look at the last 4 years, incomes have went up, sales have went up 65% in the Big Three. CEO pay went up 40%. Stock buybacks went up 1,500%. This is our time. We call this our generation defining moment. This is it. And so, and when I talk about not having limits, throughout my campaign running for this job, and even since then, when we're talking about our issues, when we put our demands out there, I can't tell you how many people would say, oh, you'll never get cost of living back. That's a thing of the past. Why are you fighting for pensions? We'll never see a pension. And all I heard is what we can't do. And unfortunately, that was driven by a leadership that had a can't-do mentality, settling for the bare minimum and making people think that's okay. The sky has to be the limit. We cannot limit ourselves on what we can achieve. If the founders of this union would have went into negotiations saying what they can't do, if they would have went in and they would have fought, or if they wouldn't, they fought. They fought. They got beat up. Some gave their lives to have this opportunity, and they didn't give a damn what anybody told them they couldn't have. They said, no, we're going to take it. We're going to get what we have to get, no matter how, by any means necessary.
I don't really care if you endorse President Biden. That's all that CNN cares about. But I am interested, you hear some verbally kind of pro-worker language. He did, stop a railroad strike at the end of last year. But aside from, occasional vague support, there hasn't been a lot of action. There was no push for the PRO Act, which would have, been a big boost for organized labor when Democrats had complete control. Biden apparently is sending 2 top aides here. I don't know what they'd be doing, but we know the Republicans and their views on labor. Do you need more from the Democratic Party aside from, talk and showing up when the cameras are here?
Yeah, I mean, the proof's got to be in the pudding. The proof's going to be in the work. I mean, and as we said, our endorsements are going to be earned. It would drive me nuts as a worker to just watch sometimes we just endorse people, and there's really no body of work behind that. And we can't be taken for granted no more. Workers shouldn't allow themselves to be taken for granted. And there's a lot of things going on in this economy, and there's a lot of things with the EV transition. I mean, we're not against a green economy. I mean, we got to have clean air. We got to have clean water. You know, we got to have a world for people to live in, future generations to live on. And but it's got to be a just transition where, you know, labor has a seat at the table. You know, there's a lot of money, you know, with the IRA that was put in play with the government, a lot of our taxpayer dollars to help fund this transition. But again, like always, the corporations come with their hands out. There's always a way, the government finds a way to put money in their pockets, but labor gets left behind. Labor cannot continue to be left behind. And that's been our message to the White House, to Congress, and to anyone that'll listen. And so, you know, that's got to change.
So you can really see there the way that his vision is to try to restore the previous era's understanding of what an auto worker job should mean. That it should be the gold standard, as he put it. It should mean that you can have a stable middle class life. And by doing so, he's trying to redefine what that looks like for the entire working class, what the entire, you know, blue collar and also service sector working class should be able to expect from their job. So, you know, I think he's very compelling. He's very clear. He was just elected, as I've pointed out, and over the sort of like historic, more company-tied leadership, the members for the first time had a truly democratic election. This is the leadership that they chose. They wanted to go in this more militant direction because they've seen the way that their wages have been eaten away and eaten away and eaten away over years. They've seen the way that they got nothing back after basically bailing out these automakers. And the latest information just this morning is that they've set a kind of a new deadline of noon on Friday. If they aren't able, which it doesn't look like they're likely to be, aren't able to come to some sort of a contract agreement before noon on Friday, they're going to then escalate the strike and bring in additional plants from the big three in order to strike and join what's already about 10,000 workers out of the, I think it's 10,000 out of the 150,000 UAW workers who are already on the picket line. So you can hear a lot of clarity there in what his goals ultimately are.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting the way that he's phrasing it. It's very important, actually. It probably comes at the best possible time. I also think that his confrontational attitude, specifically toward the boss class, as you said, you know, coming in a time of historic acceptance of unions, of growing political, no, I wouldn't say there's political opposition in the same way that there would have been, you know, 10 or 15 years ago. So anyway, I think it's very interesting to see how he's positioning himself, but also to see how much, you know, given the interviews that we saw with the workers, all of them, they didn't want to get involved in the politics. They're just like, look, we just want better pay. So clearly he is speaking, you know, on behalf of them, and that militant attitude is reflective of what they elected him to do.
Yeah.
That's probably the biggest takeaway.
He was very critical of Trump,
Right.
saying we are fighting with every fiber of our being against the billionaire class and need to stop electing these people who are, you know, basically screwing everybody over. But he also has been very critical of the Biden administration and saying, you know, their big rub is not that they don't want to transition to EVs. It's that they want to make sure that those jobs are going to be union jobs. That's the big rub. The original plan of the idea of the administration, the Inflation Reduction Act, is that those incentives to the car makers would come with a requirement that they be union jobs, but that got stripped out in negotiations. Joe Manchin in particular didn't want it. And so there are now no protections in the Inflation Reduction Act to make sure that these new battery plants and the new EV manufacturing facilities are actually union. So that is at the core of this fight. That is a genuine rub between the auto workers and the Biden administration. It's something that, of course, Trump honed right in on and is trying to use to create a gulf there, and, you know, is obviously going to be in town next week. But, you know, from what I can tell from Shawn Fain and from the rest of the membership, like, those political fights are really secondary to them. They're very much focused on the here and now. What's my wage going to be? What are my benefits going to be? What's the future going to be for me and my family in this industry? And how are we going to make sure that we secure our part in it? In that way, it really reminds me a lot of some of the fights with the writers and actors who are also looking at the way their industry is changing.
With AI.
And saying, this is our chance to make sure that we have a secure spot in what this future looks like with AI and also with streaming. And they can already see the way that they're getting completely screwed in terms of streaming revenue. I mean, just basically cut out completely from streaming revenue, whether you're an actor or a writer. And so they're saying, we're using this little moment that we have when contracts are up And when the labor market is tight, and when we have an administration and National Labor Relations Board that at least is not going to completely screw us, to try to make sure we can secure our future in a changing industry. And it's the exact, very similar dynamics here with auto workers.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how it continues to spiral. It seems like the lawmakers the bosses aren't giving in here. So a wider strike obviously will really hit their bottom line, and we'll see if they can hold out as long as the studios can. I don't think so, given the current economic conditions. Just how united the UAW is, and their ability to stretch and all that. But hopefully it's not a long one. Hopefully.
They seem very committed, and we'll see what the automakers ultimately do. The ball is in their court, as they say. Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.